I want to do something a little different than what we've been doing over the course of the last 8 weeks in this space. Instead of taking a massive deep dive into one guy that is going to hear his name called near the top of the 2020 NBA draft, I want to take a look at 5 guys that I think are going to have the best chance to outperform where they get picked on November 18th. Whatever you want to call them, sleepers, underrated, undervalued, overlooked, these are the guys that I would be telling my general manager to find a way to get into our organization if, I was in the NBA and not on YouTube. Anyway, I'm going to start things off with a guy that, if you followed me for a while, you should know would be at the top of this list. Michigan State's Xavier Tillman, a 6'8", 240-pound big man. Tillman is coming off a junior season where he was one of the most productive players in the country, averaging 13.7 points, 10.3 boards, 3.0 assists, 2.1 blocks, and 1.2 steals. Bo Outlaw in 1992-93 is the only player that has reached those thresholds since 1992. Tim Duncan came close as a junior and a senior. No one else has gotten there since 1997. We're going to talk about the defense here in a second, but to me, the most important part of Tillman's game, the thing that I believe will set him apart from all of the other really good 6'8" defenders out there, is that he is a legitimately great passer. Watching the way that he and Cassius Winston operated together in pick and rolls was so much fun. I think the real value here is going to be in short roll actions. His basketball IQ is just so high, and his ability to read a defense and make the right decision in those 4-on-3 situations is better than any other big man in this year's draft. That right there translates. That right there is something that NBA teams can utilize tomorrow, especially if his jumper develops to the point that he's a threat from the perimeter. But his IQ goes beyond the offensive end. You often hear the cliche about coaches on the floor in college hoops, and typically that refers to a point guard. Well, Tillman was a coach on the floor at the 5. He's a terrific communicator defensively that marshaled the Michigan State defense the way a middle linebacker does in the NFL. He ate up the likes of Caleb Wesson and Luka Garza and Kofi Cockburn. He's switchable when he needs to be. He can defend the rim. He averaged 4.0 blocks plus steals per 40 minutes. And then you get to the maturity part. Tillman is just a wonderful young man. He's a homebody. He's already married with 2 children. I spoke with him in March for a story after Xavier Jr. was born, and he told me the best part of his day was washing the dishes because it let him feel like he was contributing to his family. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Bam Adebayo, but he could step into an NBA game tomorrow and do the things Bam does on a second unit. And that's just his floor. He's a top 20 player in this draft. And if he falls to the second round, you can just about guarantee that he'll end up on Golden State's roster, because that's just the way these things work, right? Now, the next guy on this list fills a similar role to the one that Tillman will play at the next level. Paul Reed. Yes, a player from DePaul. I know. I'm surprised too. Before I get into it, I want to point something out. These are Paul Reed's stats from this past season when compared to Xavier Tillman and Memphis big man Precious Achiuwa. All 3 players turned 21 in 2020. Reed, a junior, is just 3 months older than Achiuwa, a one-and-done quote-unquote freshman. DePaul played a top 30 schedule in college basketball this season. Achiuwa played a schedule that slotted outside the top 75, yet Achiuwa is projected as a possible lottery pick. Tillman is projected as a borderline first rounder, and Reed, he's considered a mid to late second round pick. And I just cannot wrap my head around this fact. Yes, I understand DePaul collapsed down the stretch last season. Reed was a lot more fun when the Blue Demons were beating the likes of Texas Tech and Iowa and getting ranked in the top 25. It's less exciting when they yet again finish at the bottom of the Big East. But as the Athletic Sam Vecini noted earlier this year, DePaul outscored opponents by 7 points per 100 possessions with Reed on the floor. When he was on the bench, they were outscored by 22 points per 100 possession. None of the struggles that DePaul had were his fault. Now, look, you're not drafting Reed to be a go-to scorer at the next level. That's not who he is. But at 6'9" and 220 pounds, Reed may just be the most impactful front court defender in this draft. He can block shots from the weak side. He has quick feet laterally and quicker hands on the ball. You're not drafting him for his offense. You're drafting a guy that's going to provide you with never-ending defensive events while providing switchable defense. And I also want to be clear, I'm not taking a shot at the Shua here. I think he's going to be a fine NBA player. I like him as a prospect. I just don't understand how there can be such a gap between the way that he's viewed and the way that Reed is viewed. On the entirely opposite end of the prospect spectrum resides Sam Merrill, who may very well be the best shooter in this year's draft. A 6'5" combo guard from Utah State, Merrill can do everything that you need a shooter to be able to do. He can run off of screens. He can be used in DHOs. He's an elite catch and shoot floor spacer with a solid pump fake. As a senior, he shot 41% from 3 on 6.8 attempts per game. For his career, he shot 42% from 3 on 5.8 attempts per game. Those are terrific numbers before you factor in that he shot more off the dribble jumpers than he did catch and shoot jumpers. But perhaps what sets him apart from the other guys labeled as shooters is his ability to handle the ball and play off the bounce. More than 31% of Merrill's offense came via ball screens according to Synergy. He was Utah State's highest usage player, and while he's not going to be confused with Cassius Winston, he's a really good decision maker. Case in point, he finished the season with a turnover rate of just 10.9, which is non-existent for a guy that had the ball in his hands as much as Merrill did. There are going to be very real defensive limitations here, but those exist for guys like Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson too. In a league that is increasingly skewing towards skill, getting a guy as good as Merrill in the late second round seems like incredible value. Because if there had been an NCAA tournament, I have to imagine Merrill would have played his way up draft boards. In 3 Mountain West tournament games, Merrill averaged 27.7 points and hit the auto bid clinching 3 to beat juggernaut San Diego State.
56, Merrill for the lead. He's got it!
If he does that while carrying the Aggies to, let's say, the Sweet 16, is he still going in the late second round? I don't think so. The guy that Merrill picked off in the Mountain West tournament title game was Malachi Flynn, an All-American point guard that led San Diego State to their best non-Kawhi season in program history. Flynn is a fascinating prospect to me. He's a 6'1" point guard that plays as a scorer first. He spent 2 seasons at Washington State before transferring to the Aztecs. He's not a great three-point shooter, hitting just 37% of his threes on 6.7 attempts per game this past season. And he has the kind of questionable physical tools that makes it easy to doubt his ability to defend NBA point guards. All that said, Flynn was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Mountain West this past season. You just can't beat him off the dribble. He knows how to move his feet, and he knows how to use his body to cut off angles. He's a terrific team defender as well, with a great sense of anticipation. And he is an absolute killer in ball screens. More than 40% of his offensive possessions came in ball screens, and he finished in the 96th percentile nationally, averaging 1.06 points per possession in those actions. And since we're touting Merrill's lack of turnovers, I think it should be noted that Flynn had a much higher usage rate than Merrill, and his turnover rate was just 11.7. Malachi Flynn has Monte Morris written all over him. How is that not a guy that is worth taking in the top 20? The last guy that I'm going to talk about here is Desmond Bane from TCU, a sharpshooter and a power lifter's body. Bane is a 6'6" wing that hit 44% of his threes on 6.5 attempts per game as a senior. For his career, those numbers are 43% and 4.1 attempts per game. But he is much more than just a catch and let it fly guy. Bane has a step back package. He is a terrific passer that can operate out of ball screens when needed. He averaged 6.3 boards per game as a senior. His wingspan is actually 2 inches shorter than his height, something that I've never seen before. And the fact that he is built like John Cena makes him somewhat top heavy. There are going to be plays where his ankles get shredded by someone in a switch, and he'll probably never be a playmaking defensive weapon given that wingspan. That said, I don't think he's going to be a full liability defensively. He's a smart defender and he's a good team defender, and everything that he can do on the offensive end makes up for the struggles that he is going to have. He is a net positive, and in a day and age where every team in the NBA is looking for shooting and playmaking on the wing, Bane is that guy. I don't see how he can drop out of the first round. Now, let's see which NBA executives here are smart enough to listen to my advice on these guys, because the ones that don't may end up here on YouTube with us sooner rather than later.